What if the person you dismissed at first glance was the one who saw your child's soul before you ever did? This isn't a story about qualifications. It's about connection. It's not about fixing a child, but hearing the silent language of a boy the world gave up on. He was wealthy, busy, and broken. She was calm, worn, and honest. And when their worlds collided, everything changed. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see your own life too. You ever meet someone who doesn't fit the picture in your head, but somehow fits perfectly into the hole in your heart? That was the first thought Ethan Zhao had when he opened the door that Wednesday afternoon. He expected a clipboard, a pressed suit, maybe a tablet full of references. What he got was a woman in a sunflower yellow jacket, holding a worn leather tote, her shoes scuffed at the toes like they'd walked a long way. "Hi," she said simply, offering her hand without hesitation. "I'm Maya Thompson." Ethan hesitated. She looked more like someone's favorite aunt than a certified behavioral specialist. And that right there was the problem. Ethan Zhao was a man who trusted data. He trusted numbers, systems, the clean logic of code and efficiency. What he didn't trust? Gut feelings, intuition, warmth. Especially not when it came to his son. Liu Zhao was 8, bright, gentle, and locked inside a world of silence that Ethan hadn't been able to crack. Since his wife May passed away 2 years ago, everything about Ethan's world had shifted. The grief had been like fog, thick, constant, disorienting. He buried himself in his work, drowning in the demands of his Seattle-based health tech company, Core Vitals. Investors were circling. His product was about to launch, and Leo needed someone Ethan couldn't be, so here they were. The 7th interview in 5 months, and Ethan was tired, so very tired. He motioned to the dining table. Maya sat down gently, her tote resting at her feet. No resume binder, no certifications displayed. Just a folded paper she passed across the table. "Community-based care," she said softly. 27 years. Ethan glanced down at the resume. Typed in Times New Roman. Library printer ink faint in places. It listed churches, shelters, after-school centers. Not a single. "Big name institution," he cleared his throat. "You've worked with children before?" Maya nodded. "Most of my life. Kids who slipped through the cracks. Some with autism, some with trauma. All with voices no one knew how to hear." Her voice was calm. Not rehearsed, not selling. Just true. Ethan studied her face. There were lines around her eyes, but not the tired kind. The kind that came from smiling through struggle. He looked back down at the paper. "Leo's not easy," he said. "He's nonverbal, sensory sensitive, prone to shutdowns. He doesn't let anyone touch him. Sometimes he screams for hours." Maya didn't flinch. "That's not hard," she replied. "That's pain." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me?" She folded her hands on the table. "When a child can't say what's wrong, they find other ways to scream. I don't hear a tantrum. I hear a message." Her words hit somewhere he wasn't ready for. He masked it with a cough. "You know who you're interviewing to care for, right?" She nodded. "Liu Zhao, your son." He leaned back, arms crossed. "And why do you want this job, Maya?" She turned, eyes flicking to the hallway where Leo's bedroom door was barely ajar. There was a quiet rhythm coming from inside. A soft tap, tap, tap. Leo with his wooden blocks, always stacking, always alone. "I'm not here for the job," she said. "I'm here for the boy." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Is there a difference?" Maya looked him dead in the eye. "Yes. A job ends at 5, a child doesn't." He said nothing. Not because he agreed, but because he didn't know what to say to that. She rose gently. "I know I don't look like what you had in mind. But I've sat on living room floors with boys who hadn't been hugged in years. I've waited weeks for a single glance. And I've seen the power of being still, until they let you in." Ethan stood too. There was no contract, no promise, but something about her presence made the air feel less heavy. He swallowed. "You start Monday." She nodded, offering a quiet smile. "Thank you, Mr. Zhao." But Ethan didn't thank her back. He just watched as she walked out, sunflower jacket fading into the gray Seattle mist, and he had no idea he'd just invited a storm and a light into his son's world, and into his own. Monday morning arrived with the same urgency and noise Ethan had grown used to. Emails stacked like dominoes. 2 missed Slack calls. Leo was refusing breakfast again. Ethan paced the kitchen, shirt half tucked, phone wedged between shoulder and ear. "Yeah, I'll approve the UI flow," he muttered, even as his eyes flicked toward the hallway for the 4th time in 2 minutes. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps, right on time. He didn't need to look. It was her. Maya stepped inside, without the air of someone trying to impress. No box of toys, no folder of behavior charts. Just that same worn tote bag and a scarf tied loosely around her hair like a nod to a life lived in motion. "Morning, Leo," she said gently, not even glancing at Ethan. Leo didn't answer. He never did, especially not to new people. He sat at the kitchen table, knees up, arms folded tight across his chest, rocking ever so slightly, his cereal untouched. Maya didn't flinch. She crouched low, not close enough to intrude, but just enough to not tower over him. "I like your socks," she said, smiling softly. "Lime green. They remind me of the Jolly Ranchers I used to sneak in church." Leo didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge her at all. Ethan sighed from the counter. He doesn't talk. He might growl if he's feeling generous. Maya gave a light chuckle. "I'm not expecting him to." She was still focused on Leo. "He doesn't owe me anything." That answer, so casual, so clear, got under Ethan's skin. He took a long sip of coffee, masking his discomfort. "I'll be working in the study," he said, already walking away. "There's a list on the fridge. Therapy, feeding times, meds. Stick to it." Maya nodded once. Ethan closed the study door behind him, but he didn't sit down, didn't open his laptop. Instead, he stood just behind the door, ear tuned to the quiet house, half expecting to hear a crash or crying, maybe even silence thick with tension. But what came next wasn't any of those. He heard a hum, soft, low, a song he didn't recognize. Then a voice, calm, rhythmic. He cracked the door. Maya was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a small wooden xylophone resting across her lap. She tapped a slow, gentle rhythm, pausing between each note. Leo stood nearby, not playing, not responding, but watching. That alone was more than Ethan had seen in weeks. "That's a C note," Maya said softly, tapping it again. "You can hit it if you want. You don't have to. I'm just playing." Leo didn't move, but his eyes flicked to the instrument, then back to her face. Maya smiled, like he had just performed a concert at Carnegie Hall. Ethan didn't understand it, didn't know what to do with the tightness building in his chest. The rest of the day unfolded without a single meltdown. No food thrown, no screaming, not even the afternoon fight over taking meds. By 4 p.m., Ethan found himself in the hallway again, hovering. "You spying on us, Mr. Zhao?" Maya's voice floated from the living room. She didn't turn around. Caught. He stepped forward, sheepish. "Just making sure everything's okay." "Everything's fine," she replied, still watching Leo. He ate his pears, even let me brush his hair. Not bad for day one. Ethan blinked. "He never lets anyone brush his hair." Maya shrugged. Maybe no one asked nicely. It was said so simply, like she was describing the weather. But something about it hit Ethan hard. Because maybe, just maybe, that was true. It wasn't just that the day had gone well. It was that something quiet had shifted. The silence in the house wasn't tense anymore. It was soft, like background music instead of static. And Maya? She hadn't tried to change the house or fix anything. She was just present, steady, like a metronome in a room that had forgotten rhythm. That night, Ethan stood outside Leo's room for a long time. There was no screaming, no restlessness, just the soft murmur of Maya's voice reading a book Ethan hadn't even known they owned. He rested his head against the doorframe, eyes closed, listening, not to the story, but to the peace he hadn't heard in far too long. By the third morning, the rhythm in the house had changed. Not dramatically, not with trumpets or confetti, but in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. Leo no longer curled into himself when Maya entered the room. He didn't smile, didn't reach out, but he watched her closely. And sometimes he'd scoot his chair just a little closer when she sat down beside him. Ethan noticed. From the hallway, from the study, from behind his coffee mug. Maya never said much about the progress. She just kept showing up, with patience in her eyes and calm in her voice. That Thursday, she arrived with something new in her tote bag, a soft thump as she placed it on the living room rug, a simple wooden puzzle, big animal shapes with chunky knobs. Leo stared at it like it was a trap. "I thought we could try this today," Maya said, crouching down, never pushing. She held up the giraffe. "Want to try this one?" Leo didn't move, didn't blink. She set it gently on the rug beside him. "Okay," she said, as if he'd already answered. "I'll leave it here." From the hallway, Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "He hates puzzles," he said flatly. "Threw a block at the last therapist who brought one." Maya didn't look up. "He hasn't tried this one." Ethan stepped closer. "You've been here 4 days. That's not enough time to know what he'll do." Now she looked up, eyes clear, voice steady. "You're right, but it's long enough to let him decide." And that's when it happened. Leo reached. His small hand grasped the giraffe shape, then slammed it down, once, twice, over and over until the knob cracked and the wood splintered. Ethan moved instinctively. "That's enough, Leo." "Don't," Maya said quickly, holding up a hand. "Let me try." Leo's chest was rising fast, his eyes wide and wild. He knocked the rest of the puzzle out of her hands. Pieces scattered, then a guttural sound. Deep, raw. Ethan tensed, ready to intervene. But Maya? She didn't move. She crouched beside him, lowering herself until her eyes were level with his. "I know you didn't like that," she said gently. "And that's okay. You don't have to like puzzles. You don't have to like me." Leo stared at her. "You can be mad," she continued, "but we don't have to break things to show it." She didn't reach out, didn't try to fix, just sat there, quiet, steady, unmoving. For 10 long minutes, nothing happened. Ethan stayed frozen in the hallway, heart racing, completely unsure who this woman was or what spell she was casting, and then Leo shifted, inched closer, then leaned his head against her shoulder. Not a hug, not affection, just contact, solid, present, real. Maya didn't say a word. She didn't celebrate, didn't praise, just let him rest. And somehow that silence said everything. Ethan stepped back, returned to the study, closed the door, but he couldn't work, couldn't answer a single email. His thoughts stayed on the boy who had never, ever done that for anyone, not even him. And it wasn't just pride or jealousy or shock. It was something else, a question, echoing in the quiet. Why her? And deep down, Ethan already knew the answer. Because she saw Leo, not the silence, not the diagnosis, not the challenge. She saw the boy. And for the first time in a long time, so did he. By the end of the first week, Maya had become a quiet rhythm in the Zhao household. She didn't rearrange furniture, didn't change the routines. She simply moved with them, like she'd always belonged. Leo hadn't spoken, not a word. But the silences were softer now, fuller, less like absence, more like trust. He followed her from room to room, rested a hand on her knee when she read, scooted closer during lunch. It wasn't loud progress, but it was real. One morning, Maya knocked gently on Ethan's office door. He looked up, surprised. She usually respected the boundary. "Got a second?" she asked. He nodded. She stepped inside, holding a slim green binder. "The therapy log," she said. "The one in the cabinet?" He stiffened. "Yeah?" Maya flipped it open. The pages were covered in neat handwriting. Daily notes. Behavior. Patterns. Progress charts. She tapped a page halfway through. Why does it stop here? February 17th. Ethan didn't answer right away. Just stared at the date. Maya waited. Patient, but firm. It's complicated, he said finally. I'm not trying to pry, she replied. But if something changed, if something happened, I need to know. Ethan looked down at his hands, then passed her toward the hallway. His old therapist, Dr. Brent Carver. Maya nodded. I saw his name, highly credentialed, big reputation. Ethan gave a dry laugh. Cost more than my accountant. He paused, voice tightening. Leo was making progress, tiny, but there. And then, one afternoon, I came home early, found Carver in the living room, not yelling, just cruel, mocking him, whispering things. Maya's eyes darkened. What things? Ethan clenched his jaw. Stuff like, you'll never talk. You're broken. Your dad's too busy to notice. Silence. I fired him on the spot, Ethan said, voice hoarse. Reported it, but he vanished. Shut his practice down, gone. Maya sat slowly on the edge of a chair. You didn't tell the new therapists? He shook his head. No. Didn't want Leo labeled. Didn't want people to treat him like damaged. Goods. Maya's tone was gentle. But he's not damaged. Ethan looked at her, eyes glassy. I know that now. But I didn't know how to help him back then. She nodded, folding her hands. You didn't fail him by hiring the wrong person, Ethan. You fail him by pretending it never happened. That hit him like a slap wrapped in silk. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I thought, if I gave him the best, the gear, the apps, the consultants, I could fix it. Maya met his gaze. You can't buy healing, but you can choose to show up. Ethan let out a shaky breath. I'm not used to people calling me out, especially in my own house. She smiled softly. I'm not used to working for someone who lets me speak. That made them both chuckle, just a little. Maya reached into her tote, pulled out a small pouch. Something I made years ago, she said, placing it on the table. Inside were fabric cards, each labeled with an emotion. Frustrated, calm, safe, scared. Stitched in textures, rough burlap, soft fleece, bumpy cotton. For some kids, she explained, touch says what words can't. Ethan picked one up, frustrated. The texture made his skin crawl. Another said safe, smooth, warm. He looked up. Did Leo? Not yet, she replied. But he will. He nodded slowly, then whispered, thank you. But Maya shook her head. Don't thank me. Just tell him it's okay to feel, even the hard stuff. That night, Ethan sat outside Leo's room again, but not to listen, not to hover, just to be close. Inside, Maya read quietly. Leo curled up nearby. Ethan watched the flickering light under the door and for the first time let the past rise, not to drown in it, but to understand it. And in that quiet, he realized something Maya had known all along. Sometimes silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's a story waiting for someone brave enough to ask. The rain started before sunrise, not a drizzle, not a polite whisper on the windows, but a storm. Heavy, relentless. The kind that sounded like the sky was trying to remember how to cry. Leo hated storms. Always had. The thunder made him freeze. The lightning made him hide. That morning, he wouldn't leave his bed. Ethan stood in the hallway, coffee in hand, watching the closed door. Inside, Maya sat on the edge of Leo's mattress, humming, a low, steady melody, like the kind you hum to babies or to your younger self when you need to feel safe. Ethan knocked softly. She's been in there an hour, he muttered to no one in particular. He won't eat, won't move. Maya glanced up. He's scared. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. Of what? She looked at him carefully. Of something bad coming. The noise outside matches the fear inside. Ethan hesitated. Sometimes, he said, his voice quieter. I think he knows. I think he remembers. More than I want him to. Maya nodded. He doesn't need words to remember. There was a pause. Then Ethan stepped into the room, sat at the edge of the bed, put the coffee down, and for once, Didn't bring his phone, his laptop, or his business tone. I wasn't supposed to do this alone, he said, his hands resting on his knees. Maya didn't interrupt. I loved May, he continued. She was the heart of this house, the glue. He swallowed hard. She was diagnosed in May, stage 4 ovarian cancer. By November, she was gone. Leo shifted slightly under the blanket. His small hand moved closer to Maya's wrist. Didn't cry at the funeral, Ethan whispered. I couldn't. We had investors, a product launch, deadlines. Maya's voice was calm. Did you ever cry? Ethan shook his head. I told myself I'd do it later. But Leo stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped sleeping. He paused. I didn't know how to grieve and take care of him at the same time. Maya gently stroked Leo's back. He didn't stop talking, she said softly. He just changed languages, started speaking with silence. Ethan stared at his son. I used to walk past his room at 2 a.m. and hear him making little noises, not words, just sounds, like he was calling someone who wasn't coming. Maya nodded slowly. He was calling her. Leo let out a soft breath. Not quite a sigh, not quite a sound, just release. She used to let him sleep on her chest, Ethan said. I'd find them like that in the mornings. Her arms wrapped around him, his fingers tangled in her hair. It was the only time he looked at peace. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then quietly Maya said, when I was 9, my mother was arrested. Painkillers that weren't hers. I never saw her again. Ethan looked over, surprised, but she wasn't done. I went through 6 homes in 7 years. Different smells, different rules. Never the same voice twice. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. One woman, Mrs. Lillian, gave me a drawer in her kitchen. Just for my things, said, now you belong here. It was small, but it was the first time I didn't feel like I'd vanish if I left. Leo shifted again. His eyes opened slowly, and for the first time all morning, he looked at Ethan. Not past him, not through him. At him. He remembers her, Ethan said softly. Doesn't he? Maya nodded. Not in words, but in ways that matter. Ethan wiped his face, fingers trembling. I don't know how to talk about her without falling apart. You don't have to be perfect, Maya said. You just have to be honest. Leo reached slowly toward the nightstand, touched a photo of May, then touched his chest. Ethan's breath hitched. He misses her, Maya whispered. Just like you. The thunder rumbled again outside, but inside, for the first time in a long, long time, the storm had started to pass. It was supposed to be a quick trip. One night in Portland. Investor dinner. In and out. Ethan didn't even pack a suitcase. Just his laptop, his phone, and a fresh stack of worry he wasn't ready to name. Before leaving, he stood at the front, watching Maya kneel beside Leo, adjusting his soft knee braces with gentle fingers. Are you sure you've got this? He asked. She didn't look up, just said, I've got him. And somehow that answer meant more. 24 hours. That was the plan. But the flight home felt longer. Heavy, somehow. Like the plane was dragging something unseen through the sky. By the time Ethan pulled into the driveway, the sun had dipped low, clouds hanging thick over the Pacific Northwest sky. The porch light was on. The living room window glowed warm. But what stopped him, cold, was a sound. A sharp, sudden burst of something he hadn't heard in over a year. Laughter. Not Maya's, Leo's. It was rough, croaky, like an old hinge learning to move again. But it was real. He stood frozen on the walkway, heart thundering harder than the storm the night before. Slowly, he stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and apples. Baking, warmth, home. He followed the sound, afraid even a footstep too loud might break it. In the den, Leo sat crisscrossed on a large foam mat. His walker leaned nearby. He wasn't using it. He didn't need to. Not right now. In front of him, Maya held up a small mirror framed in soft yellow felt. Okay, she said playfully. Show me proud. Leo tapped his chest twice. grunted, then smiled. Maya clapped. That's right. You should be proud. Leo clapped back. Not perfect, not rhythmic, but joyful. Then she held up another picture card. Now, tired? Leo yawned on cue, then flopped forward, laughing into his palms. That laugh, that broken, beautiful laugh, cracked something open in Ethan's chest that had been locked shut since the day May died. He stumbled back a step. The floor creaked. Maya looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Leo turned, saw his father, paused, and for one terrifying moment, Ethan thought it would all fall apart, that the joy would vanish like smoke the second. He entered the room, but instead, Leo lifted his arms. Not wide, not asking to be picked up, just forward, palms up, like he was offering something. An invitation. Ethan dropped to his knees. Arms trembling, Leo tapped his fingers together. More time, more love, more this. Ethan pulled him in, held him against his chest. Leo didn't resist, didn't squirm, just leaned in, small hands clutching the fabric of his father's shirt. Missed you, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. I missed so much. Monica sat nearby, still, present, not intruding, just there. Ethan looked up at her. How did you do this? She shook her head, soft smile on her lips. I didn't. He did. I just listened. Ethan looked back at his son, brushed a hand over his dark curls. I forgot how to do that, he murmured. Monica didn't judge, didn't lecture, just said, it's not too late. He kissed the top of Leo's head. I don't know how to do this without screwing it up. Monica smiled, eyes kind. You don't have to know. You just have to show up. And in that room, with no grand music, no applause, no audience, 3 people sat in the quiet fullness of a moment that felt like the very beginning of something whole. The next morning felt different. There wasn't a celebration, no grand announcement, just oatmeal and light through the window. Leo sat at the kitchen table humming, crayons scattered in front of him, coloring the back of a takeout menu. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee, placed one gently in front of Maya. She looked up, amused. That for me? Or a bribe to stay another week? He grinned. Both. They sat across from each other, no tension, no walls. Just 2 people who had been through different storms but ended up in the same harbor. Leo tapped on the table. 3 slow beats. Ethan looked over. The boy pointed to a smudged heart he'd drawn in orange crayon. Is that for me? Leo nodded. Once, it was so simple, so small. But Ethan felt something shift. A quiet breaking of whatever had kept them apart for so long. That afternoon, they all sat in the backyard, Monica reading aloud from a picture book with no words, just illustrations. Leo leaned against a pillow on the blanket, his feet brushing the grass. His walker lay nearby, ignored. Ethan stretched out next to them, arms behind his head, watching the sky. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was full, alive. Monica paused mid-sentence. You're doing better, she said, not looking up. Ethan chuckled. I haven't yelled in 3 days. That's progress. No, she replied, turning to him. You're paying attention. He nodded slowly. I'm just trying not to miss it anymore. Monica looked down at Leo, who was now tracing the outline of a tree with his finger. Kids like him, she said. They don't grow on your schedule. But when they let you in, you better be there. Ethan reached over, squeezed Leo's foot gently. Thank you, he said, his voice quieter now. For seeing him when I couldn't. She tilted her head. You were grieving. That doesn't make you blind, just buried. He sat up, took a deep breath. I want you to stay. She looked at him, brows raised. Not just as Leo's nanny, he clarified. As part of this, whatever this is. She smiled. Warm, soft. I'll stay as long as he needs me. Leo reached into his backpack, pulled out a folded piece of paper, handed it to Ethan. Inside, a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all smiling. Underneath, Leo had scribbled a word he hadn't written before. Us. That picture would hang in Ethan's office from that day forward. Every time a pitch failed, a deal fell through, or an investor questioned the mission. He would look at it and remember why he built anything at all. Because connection isn't coded, it's lived, every day, with crayons and coffee and quiet mornings that feel like home. The sun was low, stretching long shadows across the living room floor. Dinner dishes were stacked in the sink. Leo was asleep upstairs, his favorite stuffed fox tucked under his chin. Ethan sat at the table, a cup of tea cooling in front of him. Maya walked in from the porch, her tote slung over her shoulder. "You heading out?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "Just for the night. Got a cousin in Tacoma with a birthday." He smiled. "Tell her happy birthday from me and that she owes us another pie." Maya laughed, then paused. Her hand lingered on the chair back. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan leaned forward. "Anything." She glanced upstairs, then back at him. "When you first hired me, did you think I'd last a week?" He chuckled. "Honestly, no." She raised an eyebrow. "You were calm, unimpressed. You had no binder, no degrees to wave around. I thought you'd fold by day 3. Maya smirked. "And now?" He looked at her, longer this time. "Now I know you weren't here to impress me. You were here to meet him, where he was." Maya walked over, set her tote on the table, pulled out something wrapped in a soft cloth. "Before I go," she said, "this is for him." Ethan unwrapped it. Inside were more fabric emotion cards, this time with images Leo had drawn himself. A sun for happy, a blue swirl for sad, a zigzag lightning bolt for mad, each one sewn onto fabric so he could feel the feelings, not just name them. "He's learning his language," Maya said. "But more importantly, you're learning his pace." Ethan blinked fast. "I didn't know how lost I was," he said, "until I saw him find himself again." Maya nodded. "That's what love does. It doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it whispers, just loud enough for one heart to hear another." They stood for a moment in the quiet. Then Ethan asked, "You ever think about going back into social work? Maybe teaching?" She smiled. "Maybe. But right now, this is where I'm supposed to be." He extended his hand. She ignored it, hugged him instead. The kind of hug that doesn't need words. The kind that means we survived something together. "Thank you, Maya," he said, voice soft. "For everything." She pulled back, touched his shoulder. "You did the hard part. You showed up." And with that, she picked up her tote and walked toward the door. Leo would wake up the next morning to find the new cards laid out beside his cereal. He would touch each one by one, then point to safe, then happy, then tap the heart on his chest. Some people measure success in millions, in growth rates, in expansion, but some, like Ethan, learn to measure it in moments, in crayons, in laughter, in hugs that come without warning, and in the quiet, unseen work of someone who didn't come to fix, but to feel, to stay, to help someone be seen for the very first time. So if you've ever held space for someone who couldn't yet speak, thank you. And if you're still learning how to show up, it's okay. Start today. So maybe he didn't hire a nanny. Maybe he invited in a teacher, a witness, a healer. And maybe the boy who never spoke taught the man who never slowed down how to listen. What would happen if we all paused long enough to see someone the way Maya saw Leo? Not as a project, not as a burden, but as a story still being written. Because love, real love, doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet mornings, drawn hearts, and the courage to sit still until the silence turns into trust. And if that doesn't make you believe again, in healing, in kindness, in people, then maybe you weren't listening. But it's not too late. You can start today. If this story touched you, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting to feel seen.